Well, hello everybody, this is Tim Green with the Rattle Magazine. Welcome to your critique of the week. It's Friday, September 5th. So glad you could join me for another round of exciting critiquing action. Who do we have here? Let's see. I got to say, over on X, by the way, no longer are you allowed to live stream, basically, through software like this that lets you do all the different camera views and stuff. So, no more critique of the week on X, I guess. That's so it goes. Let's see. Mary Lisa is here. Jamie Thomas, Lynn Schilling. Hey, great to see you. Yeah, so we're streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. Also, Facebook might be going the way of the dinosaur too, because I keep getting these copyright claims on the royalty-free music that we use. I have to defend it every time, and that gets annoying. It's like some kind of scam where if you claim to own the copyright, YouTube or Facebook will pay you money for putting ads into our videos until I dispute it and say, hey, this is actually public domain music. This is Tiptoe Out the Back Door, by the way, by, oh shoot, I can't see the name of the band. Anyway, it's on YouTube, live free audio library. Let's see, anyway, who do we have? Jeanette Bermia is here, Kimberly Gibson-Tran, Megan Pascone, Winston Munn's here, Jamie Thomas, Bryn Pope, Christina Nueven, Megan Pascone, I already said, I think. Maria Albergus here, Richard Lorberg, good to see you from the D.C. area. The National Book Festival is happening there tomorrow, great. Desi Cochrane is here, Tom Barlow, Patty Arbor, Cindy Guntherman, Tara Meslick-McMahon, Dick Westheimer, Brian O'Sullivan in the house, Sarah Rashid Khan, Bryn Pope, Jemina Arachavala. Let's see, Mark Grinier's here, Holly York, Elizabeth Brown from Tucson. Good to see you. All right. Last week's guest there in the Rattlecast was at Tucson 2. Of course, Richard Sykin. Anyway, we're going to go to a critique, the normal thing. What we always do is look at poems. These are poems that have been submitted critique. All you got to do is go to rattle.com/page/critique. You can find it up in that menu bar at the very top under content. Submit up to 2 poems, and then we will share our thoughts about the poems and just try to give that workshop experience where you get to see how people are actually reacting to your poems line by line, what works, what doesn't, all that sort of thing. If you enjoy what we do here, make sure to click the like button. Also spread the word. Tell people that you're learning a lot from the critique of the week, and it would be nice to watch, have more people watching all the time. Submit your poems too. If you're a regular here, I try to get you sooner than normal, and I go from the order they were received, but if you're somebody who participates, we'll get to you first. So if you have a poem you're working on, playing with, want some help on, feel free to submit it. Even if you already have, feel free to submit them again. We want to talk about good poems too. And the people who participate in the Critique of the Week are the best poets around, because we're all learning together and getting better as we go. We've been doing this for 7 years now. Anyway, let's take a look at the poems we've got today. We're going back to the oldest in the queue, and that would be Heaven on Earth by Anna Griffiths. This is from March, early March. Anna's from Provo, Utah. And let's take a look at this. The first one's called Haiku. And one thing you see here, it's kind of interesting. I have no idea why this happens. In the preview on Submittable, and these are all submitted through Submittable. That's what we do at Rattle. We use Submittable. Sometimes it shows the track notes for the track changes from Word. Even though if I were to download I don't know why, because you can have it on view track changes or not. And I think it should by default not show them, but for some reason it does sometimes. So sometimes you get some interesting notes, like you get friends' comments and stuff on some of the submissions, which is interesting. Not that we hold any of that against you, of course. Let me fix this a little bit. Okay, hang on. I want this about there. Okay, so this first one's called Haiku, which is kind of interesting. Hang on. We switched computers recently, so it's a little bit, everything's not exactly the way I want it to be. Okay, here we go. So this is the first poem, Haiku. And again, leave as many comments as you can. YouTube is the place. YouTube is where it's at. If you're on Facebook, I'll take a look and see if anybody is sharing comments or thoughts over there. Try to pass them along. But I'll try to pass as many comments along as we go. And, so this is Haiku. So haiku is a title, I guess, and I'm going to assume it's meant to be a haiku sequence. That's what you have to assume given a title like that. So haiku. His laugh, his big hugs, hammers, screws, and wall plugs, the gap in his teeth. I did not even foresee and then he was gone, yes, before the break of dawn. Just reading some rhymes in here. I'm not sure. Okay, are these isolated haiku? Yeah, the first one was 575 syllabics, not actually haiku. The second one, though, is not even 575. He did not even foresee it's like 7, and then he was gone. Yes, before the break of dawn. So it's 757. So even if you get haiku wrong, it's not wrong in the way we usually get haiku wrong by saying it's a 17 syllable syllabic form, which it's not. Yeah. Anyway, let's continue. Like angel on earth, I hope he knew all his worth. So we're having rhymes in here too. So haiku don't usually rhyme, and it's because within such a short kind of form, the rhyme stands out so much that it feels very much like that. Even though it's one, haiku is usually just 3 short lines, short, long, short. It just stands out so much in a one-liner like this. It makes it feel almost like a limerick or something when you have a rhyme in a haiku. And it's possible to do. Every rule is meant to be broken, but it's a difficult one to break because it just puts so much emphasis on the rhyme when you only have this few number of phonemes to go with. Anyway, angel on earth, like angel on earth, I hope he knew all his worth. God take care of him. I'm still not sure if this is like I don't know. I'll need him when all is dim. A man so prudent, make sure his hands get movement. Tools in his pockets, tell him to build a rocket. Send it down to me. I'll write it back to him. So calling this haiku, it's not actually haiku. As Dick Westheimer says, change the title. It's really, I guess, sort of haiku stanzas-ish or something. Yeah. Anyway, so it's a hard poem to follow too. Let me just read it like it's a straight poem. I was kind of like thinking it was haiku given the haiku title. Yeah, and Lynn Schilling points out too, language like a man so prudent is telling, not showing, and a no-no in haiku. Yeah, we do want haiku because we have such limited space. We want to have the symbols sort of straightforward. Jamie Thomas points out they alternated 575, 7575 instead of staying with 575, even if they were trying to do it by syllables. Yeah. Richard Lorberg points out that Richard Wilbur wrote a series of rhyming haiku, 575 stanzas across decades, terrific like all his work. And Zafar Kuniol has also written some poetry in this form with slant rhyme. Yeah, I think, well, if it's haiku stanzas, which really has almost nothing to do with haiku except for the fact that it's a syllabic form that was sort of, spun off the mistake of what haiku is. Haiku stanzas, to call it that, is a fine form, and I'm sure Richard Wilbur did it great. But they're not. If it's just the form of your stanza, that's not what a haiku even is either. Yeah. So as Rosnar says, better to just accept these aren't haiku and just critique it as a 3-line stanzas. Yeah, that's what we're going to have to do. So this is the kind of thing you see. One of the points of the critique of the week is to give the experience and show you what it's like to be an editor. And this poem pops up. This is the thought process you go through. Like, is this haiku? What is going on here? So often you encounter a poem and you're like trying to figure out what is going on here. And so, that's what we're doing here. So now we're going to read the poem as if it's just a straight poem that just happens to be in sort of haiku stanzas, even though they alternate. And it's called haiku for maybe a different reason than what it's being labeled as. Haiku, his laugh, his big hugs, hammers, screws, and wall plugs, the gap in his teeth. I did not even foresee I guess. And then he was gone, yes, before the break of dawn. Like angel on earth. I hope he knew all his worth. God, take care of him. I'll need him when all is dim. A man so prudent, make sure his hands get movement. Tools in his pocket, tell him to build a rocket, send it down to me, and I'll ride it back to him. So there's something interesting going on here. The main thing, other than the confusion that the title sets off, in as far as the form goes, is that the rhyme, it's really written toward the rhyme. Instead of letting the rhyme move you in surprising directions, what you really don't want to do when you're rhyming in poetry is to have the first rhyme that comes to your mind be the one you use, because it's always going to be a sort of unsurprising and rhythmically similar as far as it goes in the sentence. That's the first thing that's going to pop into your head every time. You've got to go to like deeper rhymes and find more surprising things, so they don't end up where your poem is just governed by what the first rhyme sound happened to come to your mind. And this poem feels like it's doing that. The whole poem is guided by the fact that, when you think of earth, the next thought is worth. And so how can I cram the next sentence into saying worth? And the same with everything else. The tools in his pocket, tell him to build a rocket. We're just matching rhyme there. And that's why the poem sort of feels like it's sort of randomly spun out, and it doesn't have that sort of more intense feel of surprise and mystery, that deep mystery that makes poetry special and moving. We also have, like angel on earth, it's missing the article there. It should be like an angel on earth, but because we're having this 7-5-7-5 stanza, we've crammed this in a different way to make sure that it has the right number of syllables on this line. So we dropped an article just to fit that form, and it just feels awkward and stilted. The beauty of poetry is to make speech sing. And if you're doing either of those two things, that's not really what you're doing. And so don't write toward the rhyme, write toward surprising rhymes. Try to find things, different ways of saying things, turning on things, using enjambment. Let the sentences run through the rhyme so we can have a lot of variation and surprise in that. And that's where the beauty of speech that has a metrical and rhythmic and rhyming backbeat, that's where the magic comes from. And so, the poem is just too forced on the rhyme. Yeah. And Danette Burmese says, I do like the idea presented in the last line. Yeah. Yeah, I think it sort of goes somewhere, which is, a lot of poems don't. So that's definitely a positive with this one. And I'll write it back to him. Send it down to me and I'll write it back to him. Another thing that goes on here is that I'm not sure who the he is the whole time. His laugh, his big hugs, hammer screws, and wall plugs, the gap in his teeth. I do not even foreseethe, and I'm not sure about that either, foreseethe. And then he was gone, yes, before the break of dawn. Is this like a romantic interest? At parts I was thinking it was like a father figure. So we can't really connect emotionally if we don't know what the relationship is here and what to compare it to and what the context is. So it's missing that part too. So a lot more detail. Let's just take a look at the second poem and see. This is acrostic. So we're going to have an acrostic is a poem where the first letters of each line spell out something. And so it's so this time it's scout, S-C-O-U-T, scout, acrostic. And again, we get the track notes in here, which show there's some hyperbole and onomatopoeia going on in the poem. Acrostic. Smells of a new stuffed animal, but also of the messy outdoors, cares so deeply about her people, a ton of anxious, happy barks and slobbery kisses. Outside in the hills is where she belongs, herding sheep, and that she very much misses. Utterly needy, begs with big orangey eyes and ears down for any attention she can get, tail long and luscious, swings vigorously from side to side when she is welcome among any human. So again, we get this here. I would avoid this kind of thing because these, similar to when we were talking about why rhyming generally is avoided in haiku, because it makes those words stand out so much. I mean, there's a reason why people do rhyme in advertising jingles. It's because it sticks in your head. But then only those two words stick in your head, and you don't get the full experience. In a case of a haiku, you don't get the experience of that tension between the two things that are juxtaposed. And here, that stands out so much that you sort of you forget your trying to get lost in the poem for a bit, and you're hammered with that rhyme, kisses, misses, especially when it's not rhyming other places either. So and it feels like it's writing toward that rhyme again. So avoid the rhyme unless you're going to rhyme, with intention, surprising yourself, having twists and turns on the expected. That's how rhyming should go. Let's see. But there's some nice details in the poem. Smells of a new stuffed animal, and also of the messy outdoors. Cares so deeply about her people, a ton of anxious, happy barks and slobbery kisses. It's a sweet description. Outside in the hills is where she belongs, herding sheep, and that she very much misses. See, I would just cut that. Utterly needy begs with big orangey eyes, thin ears down for any attention she can get. And the tail, long and luscious, swings vigorously from side to side when she is welcome among any human. So some nice descriptions there. Let's go to free verse. Well, we say 2 poems, actually. I guess it's a new poem. Let's move on. Okay. So anyway, thanks for sharing those. That was Anna Griffiths from Utah. Let's go next to Jasmine Whitlow from Indiana. And then here's a question. So we already talked about rhyme. I guess this is coming up as a theme. There's a spot for general questions in the submission form. General question here. I think I tend to rhyme too much when writing, and I am wondering if better poetry comes when we aren't rhyming. And the answer to that, like I've been sort of saying, is as long as you're writing, if you're using rhyme as a scaffolding and toward deepening the mystery of the experience that you're trying to articulate, then rhyme is great. If it's rhyming just to rhyme, which is the trouble that we get into so often, and we saw with the last submission, rhyming with the first thing that comes to mind that fits the sound and shape, that ends up, it feels when you do like a ChatGPT type poem. It's just like the next most expected thing is the thing that's coming, and that's not really you reaching down into your soul and articulating something that you're not quite able to articulate yet. Which is what art really is. So you have to be able to use the rhyme in order to get deeper inside yourself and what you're trying to share. And if you're doing that, rhyme is great. And people use rhyme as a scaffolding for that all the time. If you're digging deep for more distant words to rhyme, more surprising rhymes across different parts of speech, rhyming verbs with nouns, with little, article phrases and things like that, you end up giving your subconscious a little bit of room to play, and then some surprising things can come out that deepen your understanding of what you're writing about. And so if you're doing that, rhyme is great, and we all experience and feel that, the great rhyming poets, that's what they're doing, and they have trouble, getting into a deeper part of themselves without rhyming, and because that's how they've learned to do it. And so so if so the question is, are you better without rhyme? It depends. It depends how you're rhyming. Anyway, so let's take a look at this poem now that we've answered that question. I think there are 2 here, I believe. They're pasted into the doc, which always makes it a little tricky. But and I'm not sure what this word is, so let's look it up. Okay, so Masurnam is a village in India. Okay. Yeah, town in East Kazi Hills, district of Meghalaya state in northeastern India. Okay, so we're set there. Sinram. Tears fall and I begin to be reborn. The storm has came and went. It was if I was huddled in a hut praying for it to end, feeling the cold rain against my skin. Even now, thunder echoes my ears. It felt like it lasted for 3 nights. I never seen the daytime, only gray, black, and dark light. I remember opening my eyes after that 3rd night. I smiled for peace and prayed for release. So again, notice how the rhymes weren't rhyming, and then we picked up a rhyme, and then we started rhyming a bunch. So we had the light, and then night is the first thing that pops into mind. And then, I smiled for peace, and then prayed for release is where we go. And those kind of things, once you get, it's kind of like the our impulse to rhyme, which is really deep seated in our psychology, makes more rhyme come out, and you just start rhyming, and that really can take over. Like, it sort of takes the wheel of your poem. And so in this case, I would try to avoid it there. Let me see what everyone's saying about this poem. Yeah, Lynn Schilling says English is a second language. I think that might be the case. There's some missing articles and things like that. Yeah. Elizabeth Brown says, talking about rhyme done well with surprise in the language can enchant and transport. I'm thinking of poems like Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night. Yeah. Yeah. Another thing, Diamantino says, rhyme poetry makes lack of skill obvious, so it is humiliating to write in rhyme. You'll write bad poems, but if you push through it and come out the other side, rhyme poetry is so fun and memorable. And it's true. And the point of poetry is to be memorable. That's what we do as poets. That's the long history of poetry. Before we had ways to write things down, we had ways to make the sounds coming out of our mouths memorable and fix our stories there so they could be told over time to multiple people. And that's why we have this love of an ear for poetry that's part of our neurological bundles. Let's see. Richard Lauerberg says Jeanne Dubrow is a wonderful contemporary poet with a virtuoso sense of rhyme. She's great at nesting rhymes into compelling phrases. Yeah, that's the great way to do it. Anyway, let's I guess look closer at this poem. Tears Fall. Tears are a little melodramatic. It's usually, it becomes like a show don't tell kind of thing. Like there's a drama that's forced when you're pulling out the tears, and so it's something you tend to avoid because you want to evoke that emotion with what's going on and not just by saying it. Tears fall and I begin to be reborn. The storm has come, and so it should be has come or just came and went, which is why. We're thinking about this probably a translation in English. It was as if I was huddled in a hut praying for it to end, feeling the cold rain against my skin. So going to that hut, the image of that and praying it for the end, if we can focus on the details of that, that's someplace where, your mind went there, evoked this image, of being in the hut. So then you can start describing that and pushing deeper into that emotion. Why is that the image that came out? There's a whole lot more you could say and dig deeper into that by just exploring the details of this thing that popped into your imagination. And so that's one of those places I would go and follow that train, follow that little vein of, gold to see if there's a big piece of gold there or something. Feeling the cold rain against my skin. And even now the thunder echoes my ears. Echoes my ears is a little bit stilted and also a little bit cliche. It felt like it lasted for 3 nights. I never seen, and again, it should be I have never seen, or the daytime only gray, black, and dark light. So anyway, so really, what to focus on here is the fact that the being huddled in a hut praying for it to end is a vivid detail, and that's the thing where, why did that pop in your mind? And dig in there and explore that. Figure out why that came there. By going deeper, describing more of that scene, making it a scene, seeing what happens when you do, what else pops up into your mind. Letting your mind wander is part of the creative process. So go to that place, let your mind wander and see what happens, and we'll have more of a poem here. Because right now the poem is saying it rained a lot, and, it was a lot to wait for the rain. And that's really not enough. There's more underneath that on an emotional and spiritual level that should be mined because it's something that you wanted to write a poem about. So figure out what by going deeper. Let's take a look at another one. 4 Seasons. End of winter when I met you, somehow that meeting felt cool, yet warm with comfort. February, a month of love, yet most times begin with lust. Spring beginnings, deeper conversations, fulfilling your salvations. May came. Somehow we skipped Easter and an egg produced with love. Summer fun, kids, death, and more fun. It's getting hot, honeymoon ending. The real you began to flop. Fall colors like the true colors of you and me. Most days were orange and yellow. Other days were red and brown. Those 4 seasons repeated for 4 years and ended at the end of winter, like when I met you. So the you who this is written to is a specific person, I assume, and what we want is to feel that actual person. So describing, instead of going to this abstraction, and this similar to when we went to that hut, there was an interesting concrete detail. What can we find about that person? How can we make that person come to life? If the you you're writing toward doesn't feel like it's someone who's coming to life, we're not going to be able to connect with it. And so make it known who the you is, and that'll make us care more about the poem. I think that's the key to this one. Let's see. Yeah, Danette Burmese says, what do the colors mean? Just mentioning them isn't enough. Yeah, sorry, Lynn. Four Seasons is the next poem. It's a different poem. Yeah. With the last poem, too, this is a good point by Mary Ellen Carr. She says, I don't mind town name in the title, but the poem has to make me want to go there or at least research the name more. I, however, do not have that desire when I read this poem. It's because we're talking about the first poem, but that's another thing I should have pointed out. I mean, it's not just that the hut was the one detail, but what can we say about the town? How can we bring the town to life? I kind of forgot that the title is a town. In the same way we want the you, we want to get to know the you by the end of the poem. If we're going to write a poem like this and have a vested interest in it as readers, we need to know, we have to have a sense of who the you is and what our connection is as the speaker to the you. And we have to have an idea of them in our heads. And in the same way, if we're going to name the town, we want to see the town. We want to feel what's special about that, what's different. We want to feel like we've been there after reading the poem, and then we'll care more about the poem and what's going on in the poem. So a lot of times, just detail is such the key to writing. To writing in a way that's compelling enough that people will want to read and take the time to give you their ears. All right, let me go to the next poet. Again, thanks for sharing that. That was Jasmine Whitlow. And next in line, we're still in early March. Christopher Johnson from Waterbury, Connecticut, has the following. It's a very short poem. So we're getting a very much the experience of reading submissions this week. This is what it's like reading submissions. Title, Pickled Toad Knuckles. And it's up there, since it's a pasted-in poem, the title's up there, Pickled Toad Knuckles. And toe is like T-O-E-D, not T-O-A-D. Okay. White cold grasping and stretching in pain. Knuckle up is all they say. Going through walls, tried for bricks. Gloves don't adjust, skin doesn't fit. Clenched to bitter brightness, so how it's held too tightly. Not meant to exist, it has a need to stop, but it remains at the tip top. Without its attachments, the body, it wouldn't be able to raise demand. Boss as it is, pickled to reverse is safer for the moment so right. The second moment when it's time to fight. All right. Well, this poem, I have trouble following it, have trouble, it's tough to read out loud. I'd say for this, read more poetry, read your own poems out loud, read poetry out loud, read good novels out loud. Because there's some nice details in the images, white cold, grasping and stretching in pain. Knuckle up, they say. Gloves don't adjust. That was a nice image, kind of. But it's written so stilted. You just read more, okay? Please read more. Read more poetry. It's good stuff, usually. All right. Let's go on to another poem. Aria Romero has sent these. These look some more substance going on than the last couple of poems. Any general questions? Yeah. So Aria says, and Aria is from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Aria says, for the first poem, Wet Socks. Do the puddles and pools metaphors for life choices come across effectively? And do the stretched out words like stretch enhance the playful tone, or do they distract? And how is the formatting? Should any lines be tightened or expanded? And for the other one, we'll talk about the other one after we look at the other one. So let's look at wet socks first and think about those things as you go. Wet socks. You splay your fingers, stretch your toes, dip your nose where the rainwater flows. In how many puddles could you wade? knee deep in one, fingertips in another, and yet you still remember to call your mother. One leg stretched forward, the other behind. There are so many waters you have yet to find. Some pools demand a deeper dive. They stretch you thin, yet keep you alive. Puddles are fleeting, yet gentle and bright. Pools may be deeper, but swallow the light. You leap in a pool, and it spits you out. Puddles are kinder, though they left you in doubt. Your way, commitments, lost and muddled, wishing perhaps for simpler puddles. You stretch and you reach. Strong currents drag you deep, but these waters will never be yours to keep. From shallow wades to a deep sea plunge, there is only so much water we can sponge. Perhaps it's time to give pools and puddles up when there's not enough room to fill up your cup. So there's really nice wordplay here. Again, it becomes sort of sing-songy and nursery rhyme-ish because, we set up this pattern where the rhyme comes with a full stop. And it's the same kind of beat leading into that every time, over and over again. I mentioned how rhyming poems a lot of times in haiku they feel like limericks. This feels very limerick-ish too. And one of the wonderful things that you could do with something like this is write much better children's books. I saw an article just today flipping through, I don't know if it was, I guess it was Facebook, about the importance of Dr. Seuss in books that actually have music and meter and poetry in them, as opposed to the things like Dragons Love Tacos and the Pigeon on the Bus and things, and those kind of books that just have like word bubbles and there's no rhythm and there's no rhyme and there's no meter and there's no poetry. And when you're having kids, reading kids bedtime stories and all that kind of stuff, there's a way that there's a pleasure and delight in this kind of verse that has, it's both, it helps with language acquisition. It helps kids to love to talk and to learn new words, to read. It's just wonderful to have real meter and real rhyme, even if it's really, really, especially if it's really, really regular in kids' books. And actually this Wet Socks poem, I was going to say, make this a children's book. I think it's really fun. And the meter works great, and the rhyme works great, writing to those rhymes. They aren't as expected and as sort of strange, like it's your first rhyme, first thought thing, like the other poems were. These are some interesting, words to rhyme on. And it's a very playful book, and I think it would make a nice children's book, to be honest. And there's just such little good poetry within children's books, the ones that are published more often. As a parent, I had to go back to all the 1940s, 50s, and 60s kind of books, just to read my kids, because those are the things that, just as a lover of poetry and language, when people are actually writing poems in children's books, it's just so much better to read than the kind of crap they're putting out now. And so why not? I mean, and Wet Socks is a fun children's thing. As far as page poetry goes, poetry for adults, we move past that. We don't want things to be sing-song. We want them to be more complicated. Like, you grow up, you push past, you learn, you've acquired, and then you use that whole scaffolding of loving language that you acquired as a kid. A lot of us, from doing nursery rhymes and reading books like Dr. Seuss, other people from listening to church hymns and that kind of thing, and the rhythm of a preacher. And a church is a very common way to acquire a love of language. But we acquire this love of language, then we push it farther into more adult things and adult ways of doing it. And that means having enjambment, writing past the rhymes, embedding the rhymes and the rhythms and making it vary a lot more, playing with that with dexterity. And so this is sort of more in that, young audience realm, but I think it's wonderful for that. In the adult audience, though, the splay your fingers, they stretch you thin, that takes us out of the experience of the poem too. So I would avoid that stuff in a magazine like Rattle or any other magazine that's, geared toward adults. But again, going to the idea of making this a children's book, and why not? That works. That's fun for kids. And you want kids engaging in the text in that way, and not as much in the way that adults do. And so it's fine to have playful things like that. So I think that'd be a wonderful children's book, is my main thought. Oh, yeah, and thanks for this, too. Katie Scruggs Galloway reminds me, author asks if the allusion to life choices comes through. For me, not at all. I wouldn't have picked that up without the note. Yeah. Yeah. Christiana Doucette says the Dirigible Balloon publishes kids' poetry. Yeah. I mean, the nice thing about this, too, is you can see, and I think the reason why I keep going to that in my mind as I read this poem is because you can see each sort of stanza, couplet, really triplet, I guess, is its own page. And it, yeah. Sarah Rashid Khan says, I can't believe I forgot children read poetry. They do, yeah. Christiana Doucette also mentions Little Thoughts Press. So why not? Like, if you like writing like this, and it's great that you do, why not write for kids? We really need you as parents. So, yeah, and this is fun. The deeper thing you're talking about, and let me reread the comment again just to make sure I get it right. It was, do the puddles and pools as metaphors for life choices come across effectively? Let's sort of answer that too. If you splay your fingers, stretch your toes, dip your nose where the rainwater flows, and how many puddles could you wade? I mean, can't you just see that as a picture of tons of puddles and I think you'd have a character moving through this book really easily. Knee deep in one, fingertips in another, and yet you still remember to call your mother. One leg stretched forward, the other behind. There's so many waters you have yet to find. Some pools demand a deeper dive. They stretch you thin, yet keep you alive. I mean, I think it does come across that we're going for more meaning than just listing puddles. I think that comes through. So I would say that, I think that works on that level. It is a very sort of, again, like young adult type audience level, I think, because it's sort of a prescribed idea for a book where you're teaching kind of a simple lesson, I guess. And I think it fits really well for that. I won't belabor the point anymore, though. Anyway, you leap in a pool and it spits you out. Puddles were kinder, though they left you in doubt. And one of the things is, there are a few times I didn't quite think that it was accurate. And you leap in a pool and it spits you out. How does it spit you out of the pool? It spits like water out, but it's not you. So there's something a little off, just literally with that line. You weigh commitments, lost and muddled, wishing perhaps for simpler puddles. You stretch and reach, strong currents drag you deep. Here, this line, strong currents drag you deep. We've set up this rhythm. You retch and stretch, you stretch and reach. Then strong currents drag you deep. That's a lot more syllables than you've sort of established with the rhythm you've established there. It feels a little clunky in that line. But these waters will never be yours to keep. From shallow wades to a deep sea plunge, there's only so much water we can sponge. Perhaps it's time to give pools and puddles up when there's not enough room to fill up your cup. I think it could keep going, too. I like this concept. And, as something for children, it's fun. Let's see what the other poem is, too. This is Squeezy Pineapple. And let me look at the note for that poem, too. For this poem, the author says, does the father-daughter relationship feel well-developed in the short space? And the squeezy pineapple bottle is a strong visual. Is it a fitting metaphor, or should it be expanded? Okay. Again, these are poems by Araya Romero for New Mexico. Squeezy Pineapple. Mom has craved popcorn all week, so Dad invites me on a drive to the movie theater to buy popcorn. We find a bulk deal, 3x for the price of 1. Talk of popcorn prices echo in the car. It is all we can say before the space between us festers and grows like an infected wound, and we go our separate ways. We go to Smith's for ice cream and pass an aisle with the wildest confectionery toppings, rainbow chocolate sauces, 0-calorie caramels, and glass jars, squeezy bottles of the same. I smile at the pineapple squeezy bottle. It was the least appetizing of the bunch. I point and stifle a laugh. We giggle together at the absurdity of this place with the chocolates and caramels. Dad reaches for pistachio ice cream. My eyes linger at the cherry vanilla. He grabs that too, 2-gallon containers. Geez, we're set for weeks. We pick Stray bananas for a sundae. He inspects each one carefully. I hold all three. I put back a bruised one. He grabs another unknowingly, placing the same one back in my hands. A heavy basket and about 20,000 calories in my arms. He pauses at checkout, his finger outstretched and thinking. He jogs into the aisle. To my surprise, he brings back the squeezy pineapple bottle for my surprise. He won't know that I don't like pineapple, but it never did that sound better. In the car, the radio is on. I smile 3 times for the price of one. So that's a sweet story. Again, I think the poet here has a real love of poetry and language. There's nice, the first one we had a really good sense of the rhythm and sound, even though it was sort of gone in that sing-songy direction that's more like children's books. There was still a good use of rhythm for that aim. We want more variety in our poems, but there's still an ear for the sounds, and it was really nice sounds. This has some nice rhythms too, and also a lot of great detail. It's the show don't tell kind of stuff where we're actually painting a world by seeing things like an aisle with the wildest confectionery toppings, rainbow chocolate sauces, 0-calorie caramels in glass jars, squeezy bottles of the same. Those kind of details are bringing out a scene, calling to life what you're imagining of what you've seen possibly. And I think there's a real eye and an ear for that. So those details are the highlight of the poem. The thing that I think is a wrong turn, we lose out on a big opportunity is, talk of popcorn prices echo in the car. It is all we can say before the space between us festers and grows like an infected wound. So first of all, I want to have the experience in the poem of knowing what the spaces between us festering and grows. Like, why? What is that like? What happened? How can you describe that scene? It's like we skipped that whole moment, and instead we're told about it instead of actually shown it. And I want to be along for the ride on that too. So let us know more about the relationship. What actually happened? Why did that fester and grow? And maybe you can come back to it later in the poem, or you can get to it more there. Festering and growing like an infected wound is kind of a bit of a cliche as far as the simile goes, and it's also a little gross for like squeezy pineapple. So it's sort of like there's certain things you don't want to talk about at the dinner table because then no one's going to want to eat, and that's one of them. And so it doesn't really fit the content of the poem either. So I'd find a different metaphor there. And also, I don't know, why, again, for the literal, I don't know why you went your separate ways when you're in the same car, then you go to the same store. Because in the next line, we go to Smith's for ice cream. So, so that line doesn't do it too. It feels like you didn't want to write this part. And so I'd suggest actually writing it out, what happened and how it felt. And so we get to be part of that experience too. Let me see. Is there anything else anybody could say? Why the indentations? Yeah. Yeah. Katie Scruggs Galloway put it this way: as a reader, I want to know why critique is the method of bonding for you and your father. Yeah, we just want to know more about this relationship. Kimberly Gibson Tran says, I wonder what we gain from the framing of the popcorn mission. Couldn't we just start with a list in the store? And that's a good point, too. Sorry. We're sort of spinning our wheels a little bit at the top. You could just dive in, squeezy pineapple. We go to Smith's for ice cream and pass an aisle, But I think we were driven to share this bit, even though it's sort of general summary and we don't get to actually feel it, because that's really at the heart of what the poem's about. But that's why we haven't really explored it yet completely. So dig more into this and tell us more of this story. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Jamie Thomas says, I think the popcorn was to shoehorn in 3 times the price for legitimizing the end. Yeah. And Dick Westheimer points out this, so I was going to mention it too. By the way, everyone here, quick as you can, listen to Katie's recent The Poetry Space with Billy Collins. So much insight into the fundamentals of poetry. Yeah, do check that out. It's a two-parter, The Poetry Space. I co-host that with Katie Dozier, and but she's the main producer. And we had Billy Collins on for 2 episodes. Really excellent poetry discussion and poems themselves, with a real master of inviting people into poems. Yeah. But anyway, part 2 did release today. Find part 1 from last week as well. Anywhere you get your podcasts, iTunes, etc. All right. I think I'm looking down. If you're enjoying the critique of the week, I should say too, make sure you click the like button. There's always a lot more people watching than have clicked the like, and the likes really help. Lynn Schilling says, writer might like to read Richard Sykin's prose for ideas of how to tell a story. That's a great point. Richard Sykin, the guest on the Rattlecast last week, really, really powerful prose poems in his new book, which is still on my desk. I know some things. I do know some things. Yeah. Okay, well, let's move on to another poet. We have about 13 minutes left on the clock. And next up is Martijn Satris from California, Oakland, California. No general questions, 2 poems, though. And the first one's relatively long. This is going to be the last poem if we do it. Should we do it? Let's do it. Rack Line Elegy is poem number 1. Again, this is Martijn Satris from Oakland, California. Rack Line Elegy. And this is a pretty long one. Be prepared. It's like 3 pages, I think. But there's a lot of white space. There you go. It's like that. Okay. Rack Line Elegy. Even that perfect California evening light filtered through redwoods is cracks of smoke pouring through. I taste it in the car. I'm driving your grandchildren to a house where you are not. How is time counted in more than seconds since screaming refusal with my sister hearing third hand? Your giant good heart had stopped. The fire burns chaparral, burns coastal scrub. It lifts what was living to the sky. Ash drifts down over the living and the dead. There is country on the radio, and they're so sad. There's blues on the radio. They're so very sad. They've lost their baby, and they can't get her back. Smoke layers mountains into watered ink, waves, and silk. Kind of a haiku, I guess, maybe. Eyes set against the haze and orange sun, and its shimmer on the break of waves splitting over shale. Sedimented ash and the hard remains of living moving north on San Andreas shudders. Inch by million year inch. Rhombuses and dust fall from the cliffs. Rasp of wind and brine hew them down daily. Another September heat wave, another red flag warning, and the air stayed heavy on us all. Sky behind horizon blur, ocean breathe for us, labored and ringing. These men, your age and talking like they aren't going to die. The ocean tossing in its overwhelm, you wrote. So I guess this is such a long poem. I think maybe we should talk a little bit about things. I don't know who the you is here. And coming in after a whole page, these men your age talking, we have to know that to care. And so, and also, for the beginning of the poem, for the first third of it, there's really nice details, sorry, with the coastal redwoods, the coastal scrub, the chaparral. But it's going on too long without anything happening, really. And so I think the first half could be condensed into a few lines and introduce this you earlier so we know who it is and let us know who it is. Your age. Is the you the speaker? Anyway, these men your age are talking like they aren't going to die. The ocean tossing in its overwhelm, you wrote. You were nothing and so free. They take you away, duck diving and swimming. Ashes held to one friend's heart, petals from another man's garden. Return Sorry, garden garland, your final return. That garden garland is tough. There's no you. I guess here your giant heart cracks. So we had the you there, but who is the you? Driving your grandchildren to a house where you are not. So we did have that there, but I have a really difficult time like just finding myself within this poem, even though there's interesting details. You were nothing and so free. They take you away duck diving and swimming. So a grandparent of the grandchildren, I guess, and the children take the grandparent duck diving and swimming. Ashes held to one friend's heart, petals from another man's garden, garland your final return, incense and ember reed releasing a curl in seaweed and rocks. Must be a decade since I stood in this broken down cove. So it's the I again. Have we moved forward in time? I've never been without you before. On your knees I drove to the rock, to Palo. Rhythm of return, wound into mind, body stone. Cliff top, where we stopped to watch the waves crest and smear. Then shot the foot-faltering trail to its end of rope-strung rockfall. I've ransacked everything you kept, and you kept what mattered, which was everything. So do you see how just not having a real sense of who the you is and how we're situated within this poem, there's a lot of details that could be interesting, but I'm not feeling it. I'm able to connect with them. Clifftop, where we stopped to watch the waves crest and smear, then shot the foot-faltering trail to its end at a rope-strung rockfall. I've ransacked everything you kept, and you kept what mattered, which was everything. Scrawls wedged into drawers and bagged, kindergarten grades, a milk crate from New Jersey, only your cry of jettison, the scattering of detritus to the winds, nowhere to be found. Instead, a creased, blue-inked note, save the scrap so you know I never threw it out. And below that, the name you gave me, White Froth, Blackbird, Silk Stones, Men Awashed, and Hooded. I'm having trouble placing what these are, too. Like, just they come and they're interesting lines, but again, it's like it's disconnected, so it's hard to have a feeling, an emotional resonance to them. You leave us in a dry season, driftwood traveling light slipping from hauled buoys, a single blemish flipper on the rack. In the ebb and flood of now and then, now lodged as storm-carried splinters, washed and swelled, now lost, melting in the salt water that takes us all back in its ceaseless crash. Cliffs and bluffs slow topple, shells break into glittering sand, and cobbles jostle in the roar and pull, course and drag the ground from beneath my feet. We are thrown in it with you. No ceremony but the old one. 3 women locked, arms wrapped, heads buried, eyes torn, and throats sore with loss. The waves, the Pacific waves, overall. And again, the title was Rackline Elegy. What is a rackline? Yeah. Kimmy Gibson Tran says, I'm interested in the italicized voice. We need a bit more clarity elsewhere to justify these italicized leaps, maybe? Yeah, Bryn Pope says, I guess I'm struggling with the formatting. I like the details, but I'm lost in the overall meaning. Not sure what's going on. What is a rackline? A rackline, and according to this, it's all one word, though, is a strip of organic material and debris, such as seaweed, shells, and driftwood, deposited on a beach at the high tide line. So Marcunius says the line of debris on a beach. Okay. Elizabeth Brown says, I think the italicized parts are song lyrics. Dry Montero says the title, like, I described the rackline to my grandmother, would resolve so many difficulties. It would. I mean, it's so much... Yeah. Having that be, it's just an excellent example of letting us know the situation in the title can just help us feel like part of the poem. Like we're along for the ride instead of watching something that if a car passes by, it could be the most interesting car, but you know nothing about it or the people inside, so you don't really care about the people inside, Yeah, Chelsea McClellan says, pretty sure the you is the speaker's father. And I think the beginning grandchildren line would be a good place to make that 110% obvious. Yeah. Is it I thought it was the mother by the end. Didn't we say, I mean, not that it matters much. 3 women, maybe it is, with 3 women. And so they're going, I mean, my interpretation, and it's a long time to get there, is that where I'm spreading, I think you're right. I think Chelsea's right that it's the speaker's father's ashes into the Pacific, and so they're waiting out, going over that rack line, and then maybe the smoke layers mountains into watered ink, waves on silk. Is that something? Is that like is that what's being said is the elegy, and then we're describing the elegy elsewhere? It's funny because we just mentioned that Billy Collins episode. The whole point was what we were referring to as poetic hospitality, because because accessibility gets a bad rap. But you're inviting a reader on this private, personal, important, so important that you'd be embarrassed to tell a lot of people is what poems are really about. It's like your deepest thoughts and feelings. And it's this really intimate journey that we're going on. You're inviting us in. So let us in is such a key. Be hospitable to us as readers. Have a welcome mat and let us in. Let us wipe our feet and come on inside to your story. That's what we want. And so having to guess what's going on and who the you is and sort of piecing it together like it's a puzzle, we spend all our time doing that instead of actually feeling what's going on. And so, and I think a lot of it maybe is how poetry is taught in creative writing programs especially. We get just so much of this. So maybe that's a lot of the issue. But, let us in. Listen to that episode with Billy Collins and look at how he starts a poem like the Lanyard, the Cardinal. There's a reason why the title lets us know what he's talking about, and then he starts with where he is in space while he's thinking about something, because then we can be there too. And the whole point is for us to be there too, to step into the shoes of the speaker. And so let us in, show us where the shoes are so we can put our feet in there. And then we'll appreciate the poems a whole lot more. I'm driving your grandchildren to a house where you are not. That seems like a clever way to say that the person died, probably. And it's either it's the grandchildren. So I could, probably like the mother or father of the children. So it's probably my parents. And then one of the parents is probably dead. But there's this cascade of probables, instead of just saying it, just tell us what's going on. And then we can go on that journey with you. And that's what we want to do. And there's so much really nice detail in this poem that it's just such a waste. It's sad that we can't get to experience the full extent of it because the actual just literal what's going on is held back. And that's why we talk so much about just get that out in front. So that we can go on the journey with you. We want to hear your story, but we need to know what the story is. And we don't want to have to spend the poem piecing it together because it's just not satisfying to do that. It's a waste of our time. It's a waste of our mental energy when what we really want to do is connect as human beings on this deeper level that poetry does. So let us know what's going on. Don't say I'm driving your grandchildren to a house where you are not, because there's 50 reasons you could be not there. And then, you have grandchildren, there's just a ton of different relationships this could be, even though it's probably the one that, Chelsea deduced. but why hold that back? Just don't. Let us in. Okay. But there's great details otherwise. And in the rack line, I think, knowing what that is now, having looked it up, I think there could be more to mine and play with and push as a symbol with there. I think it's a really nice thing to do, like what is left, what is washed ashore, and what does it mean to be washed ashore? It's sort of no longer in use for where it lived before, but then it's there long. I don't know. It's interesting. There's a lot of ways you could play with that. So that's interesting. Rachel Grief says, to be fair, a lot of published poetry also seems nebulous and unclear, although not in Rattle. And nobody likes or reads those poems. I mean, I don't understand it at all. I really don't. But like, I mean, I've never heard, you see poems go viral and stuff sometimes where people share them a lot. There is never a poem that's nebulous and distant and puzzle-like that anybody actually cares to read, except for maybe in a creative writing program where the professor, you get to write an essay on it because you can explain that and it like makes for a class. But nobody gives a shit about those poems. I mean, the average literary magazine has a circulation of like 1,000, and most of the people don't actually read it that get it. I mean, like why are we doing this if we're just going to be like obfuscating and like acting, just tell your stories and people will care. That's just the bottom line. Sorry if I seem frustrated. I do get frustrated with poetry sometimes because like, why should anybody want to read this stuff? Like why? If it's so obscure and distant and we don't want to be telling us what you're actually talking about, like if you're not going to tell me what you're talking about, why should I listen? And I think that's why the general public doesn't care anymore. Yeah. Also, PMB says, I don't like poems about dead relatives. It's boring. That's a different topic. But yeah, that's another thing that not in this interview, but Billy Collins says, I don't want to hear about your family. And it's not that you can't write about your family. It's just, you really have to do something to make us care, not knowing your family, And so, put yourself out there and tell what's going on. So anyway, that is my rant. Let's say the other poem before we go. Oops. I keep pushing the wrong button. There's the right button. All right. The other one's shorter. Well, it's 2-pager, but let's read it. Let's see if it has the same issue or does it let us in more? Because there are really nice lines. There's really good sense of detail here. There's some good symbolic imagery in that first poem. Let's see if we have that, but maybe a little bit more ways we can connect to this next one. We'll hope for that. Let's see. What won't burn? Walking the line of cypress, north wind breakers, a vole's jawbone, soft feathers from a kill. I would have liked to see your weathering. Know you were here and gone after last breaths. Just yourself, the wheels spinning as you stop sideways, bereft of friction. It works and works. I walked that dust and gravel daily in a decade, out and back, down into the creek-carved dip, back up again, then one more turn and you're home. You were on your way home. You were so close. I held your hand, cold like the ocean, pulled from the white shroud. I kissed you. We tried to wake you too many times, too many days too late to carry you home. With minutes left holding on, why not take you to oak or cypress, let fog and coyotes come? Burned your return, heavy like gold, like lead. A bumblebee on a broad brick walk today was attended by ants harvesting the flesh under its carapace. I would have liked to see you stripped to the bone so as to stop expecting your voice, your step, your help, your hand. Your mark is on me. You are just here. I want your death in front of me, not your absence an echo. To know your solid bones could be solace. Ash drifts like mist, smoke fills the skies daily, the yarrow and poppies taken into themselves. I walked down a dry creek, walled by graffiti and ivy, vertebrae, a column of an animal I don't know, something small and mammal lingered on the concrete. The water pools and pushes wearing and scraping so the bones were clean. I left them there, all a clatter. I'd like to hold your bones and keep them like the feathers I pocket. Jay, hawk, gull, crow. You watch shorebirds stalk and skitter, learn their names like all those years ago, learned their names all those years ago, loved the vultures. Red-hooded and death attendant. I put coins on your eyes, one from each homeland. My mother called. They survived, she said. I asked to have them, but scrabbled after, lost in the jumble. They vanished too. We've tapped the rivers to a trickle, sucked the water and sold it. Roots sink and gasp, and what's left burns. Under the dry stone gully, gray with dust and ash, there's a stream seeping, trickling in the dark. It etches its way to the ocean. Still, it is pulled and ferries us all the way down. Well, again, really nice rhythms, nice sense of the music coming out of the language, really good sense of detail. It took a long time to feel placed in this poem too. Walking the line of cypress, north wind breakers, of voles, jawbones, soft feathers from a kill. I would have liked to see your weathering. Know you were here and gone. After last breaths, just yourself, the wheel spinning as you stop sideways. It's just really hard to follow this. And again, with such great images and details throughout the poem, I love all the descriptions of nature. I really love the rhythm of the voice. There's a really great sense of the music of varying sentence length and changing up syntax and speeding up and slowing down. The really nice pacing to the poem, that rhythmic angle. But just like parsing like what's going on here. I would have liked to see your weathering. Know you were here and gone after last breaths. So I would have liked to see your weathering. So like if, I mean, I'm getting the sense at this point, and maybe partially informed by the last poem, that somebody has died. But I would like to see your weather. Like I would like to see your actual body be weathered on the side of the road. I don't understand that. Know you were here and gone after last breaths. Okay, so I'd like to see that you were still here. I guess maybe that makes sense, but then just yourself, the wheel spinning as you stop sideways. But how does the wheel... I mean, I understand if it's like as grotesque as it would be, I would still rather see your corpse here to know that you existed than not having anything to see to prove that. I think that's a beautiful thought, actually. But how does that go into the wheel spinning as you stop sideways? Like, was there died in a car accident? I don't know. Bereft of friction, it works and works. Like, what works and works? The spinning? I don't know what the it refers to. I walked that dust and gravel daily in a decade out and back, down into the creek carved dip, back up again, then one more turn in your home. You were on your way home. You were so close, I held your hand. Cold like the ocean, pulled from the white shroud, I kissed you. We tried to wake you too many days too late to carry you home. So did the person actually die on the trail? I mean, is that what we're saying? I mean, and if that's the case, just like tell us at the top so we don't have to piece this together. What won't burn? Walking the trail where you collapsed and died. Like this, let us know, and then we can be there with you. I think that. So walking home in this trail is where the person died. I held your hand cold like the ocean. Did you actually find the person there? Is that what we're saying? With minutes left holding on, why not take you to oak or cypress? Let fog and coyotes come. Burned you return, heavy like gold like lead. A bumblebee on our brick walk today was attended by ants harvesting the flesh under its carapace. So I'm just lost. I'm lost here, even though the details are great. Like, yeah, I would have liked to see you stripped to the bone so as to stop expecting your voice, your step, your help, your hand. And that's the place where the actual emotional energy from underneath the poem like comes out in places like this, where there's a nice rhythm, there's a direct statement. If we just had this poem like Rewalking the Trail Where You Died is the title, and then that the beginning, I would have liked to see you here weathering, and then describe that a little bit, and then we go down to I would have liked to see you stripped to the bone as you so as to stop expecting your voice, your step, your help, your hand, your mark is on me. You were just here. That passion comes through in that, and if that was like the structure of the poem, it would be really moving, and we'd feel that too. But all the extra stuff that we can't follow just makes it so we don't care. Or maybe I'm speaking for me. I haven't looked at the comments in a bit. But anyway, your mark is on me. You were just here. I want your death in front of me, not your absence an echo. To know your solid bones could be solace. Ash drifts like mist. Smoke fills the skies daily. The yarrow and poppies taken into themselves. I like that detail a lot. I walk down a dry creek, walled by graffiti and ivy. Vertebrae, a column of an animal I don't know. Something small and mammal lingered on the concrete. I like that. I love the column of an animal. That's a great phrase. I don't know, something small and a mammal lingered on the concrete. It's really nicely described there. Water pools and pushes wearing and scraping so the bones were clean. I left them there all a clatter. I like that too, because we know what's going on. Like, we know we saw that animal there. I'd like to hold your bones and keep them like the feathers I pocket. And again, that I'd like to hold your bones and keep them like the feathers I pocket. That's great too. Jay, hawk, gull, crow. You watch shorebird, stalk, and skitter. Learn their names all those years ago. Love the vultures. We have a few of these things just to point out where there's not actually enjambment. We need punctuation at the end of this line because it's using regular punctuation in the rest of the poem, and I've tripped over it like every time. There's like 3 instances of this there. So make sure you punctuate, or else it makes it harder to read. All those years ago, love the vultures. Red hooded and death attendant. And so that detail, learn their names, you watch the shorebird, stalk, and skitter. Those are great at character building of the you. So that's another nice thing that was missing in the last poem that we could, it's nice here. I put coins on your eyes, one from each homeland, another nice detail. My mother called, they survived, she said. I asked to have them, but scrabbled after, lost in the jumble, they vanished too. So how did they survive? Mother called, they survived. What was it? The coins in the eyes that survive? I asked to have them, but scrabbled after, lost in jumble, they vanished too. We've tapped the rivers to a trickle, sucked the water and sold it. Roots sink and gasp, and what's left burns. Under the dry stoned gully, gray with dust and ash, there's a stream seeping, trickling in the dark. There's great imagery, nice detail there. It etches its way to the ocean. I like that line too. Still, it is pulled and ferries us all the way down. And it's kind of nice too. So there's a lot to like in this poem. It's just the obfuscation that pulls out, keeps the reader at arm's length to me. And it ruins what, could be a great poem. By having that sort of distance. Yeah. PMB says there's some cultures that dig up their dead from time to time to keep them in memory. Yeah. Yeah. Winston Munn says a lot of great writing here, but unless you tell us it's a shark, you haven't written Jaws. Lisa Seidenberg said, I think the person drowned. See, I didn't get that from the poem at all. Bethany Moore says there's a kernel here to care about. I want to connect it. I want to know what the poet is saying. Yeah. Chelsea McClellan says it's so hard to do that for ourselves sometimes. Yeah, I mean, that's true. Yeah. Oh, yeah, Chelsea's saying having people who will read your poetry and tell you honestly what makes sense and what doesn't is so helpful. Yeah, I mean, that's really why we do the Critique of the Week, too. You need a workshop group or at least enough experience with honest feedback in order to, understand, to have that distance, to be able to see the poem from a reader's actual eyes. Because so much is, we think we're understandable and we're not. And that's just, it's the truth of it. So, yeah. Let me see. I'm just scrolling back up to the comments because I was talking for a long time. Yeah, D. Coleman says, I appreciate these 2 poems, though I'm partial to shorter ones. There are rich images here and lovely use of language. I totally agree. And Mary Ellen Carr says, I am sometimes satisfied with a poem for the rhythm and sounds, a lot like listening to music for me. Sheba Soup says, the problem with poems like this is the parts that inspire them haven't yet been shaped into a through line. There's great stuff here, but it's disconnected and falling flat. And I think we could... Elizabeth Brown says, did the person die in a fire? And I'm really not sure. Let's see. Desi Cochrane says, this very much reminds me of Bone Dog in length, voice, and even obscurity to a degree, but I love Bone Dog, and this loses me a bit. What I remember, I think I read Bone Dog. I'm trying to... Maybe not, unless this is something else. But even I'm thinking of something else. Anyway, yeah. Any other comments? I think we're gonna wrap it up there, unless anybody has any other comments. Yeah. Jamie Thomas says there's a lot of great allusion to myth that would be better served by better defined relationships. Yeah, and also it had to be cremation based on the coins being placed in the eyes and wanting to recover them after. That's a good point. Does a crematory get hot enough that the metal would melt in a coin, or do you? I don't even know that actually. Yeah. Well, anyway, that's going to wrap up the critique. Hope this was helpful. That's really the goal. I know it sounds harsh all the time, but we have to, if we want poetry to matter, we have to like make poems that people care about. And that's a real problem in just in the poetry world these days. There's like sort of, the Insta poetry or TikTok poetry type thing where it's not any actual connection. And then there's the poems that are so obscure in the literary magazines where it's not any actual connection. And all we want to do is connect. We want authentic connection. And there's just a real thirst for it. And so let's try to write it. And so then people can appreciate it and understand each other more and be more human. That's always the goal. Anyway, that is going to wrap up the critique. Thanks everybody for being here. As always, if you haven't clicked the like button, make sure you do click the like button. Do check out that episode of The Poetry Space with Billy Collins. It's out now on iTunes, both parts. Katie Dozier's podcast. Now coming up on the Rattlecast this Monday. Remember, we've moved to Monday now. And coming up, the guest is going to be Matthew Thorburn. Now Matthew, wonderful poet. We've published him in Rattle a few times. His most recent book is a novel in verse, String, so we'll focus on that. We'll have some newer poems, too, from a new project he's working on. Just really great poet. Going to be talking to him. Looking forward to getting to know him better as a person because I've never met him before. That is Matthew Thorburn, Rattlecast number 308. The prompt for this week was to write a poem, I assume, that features electricity. Write a poem that features electricity. I knew it was something really simple like that. That's right. Write a poem that features electricity. That is your prompt for the prompt lines. We'll also be revealing our prompt poet of the month. That is Monday night, the new time, Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great weekend in the meantime, and we'll talk to you later. Goodbye.